And a great pleasure to have joining us on the Book Talk segment of the show today. Man who's written a really interesting and very inspirational book. It's called A Divine Alignment, How God Winks Moments Guide Your Journey. We're joined today by Squire Rushnell, of course, the bestseller God Winks books that came out a couple of years ago, and this is another one in that series, and he joined us by telephone. And Squire, good to talk to you. How have you been?
Oh, great, Doug. Great to talk to you again. We love coming home. I consider that hometown USA, Sarasota, Bradenton, that whole Manatee County area.
We were just chatting before we started the interview. You were down with, of course, Louise Duarte. People don't know. Great comedian, impressionist with, I think, with Chuck McCann and Tim Conway last year. Was it? Or earlier this year, I think you were down in our area.
Yeah, it was last year at in Sarasota, so we always love coming back there.
Great town, and we always welcome Louise and you down here. But first of all, congratulations on not only this book, but the previous God Winks books. I know, keep up with you on Facebook. You do a lot of posts there. You want people to kind of give their stories of God Winks. It really has kind of taken off, hasn't it?
Well, it's absolutely amazing to me that we gather together every morning, about 130,000 of us now, and trade Godwink stories at facebook.com/Godwink. So anybody who wants to come and join us, we welcome them along. But it's fascinating. Everybody's got a Godwink story. Sometimes they don't emerge immediately, but if you start thinking about it, we all have these little experiences that are just inexplicable. And it's not easy to say, well, these are just mathematical odds, because we all have stories that defy mathematical odds. And that's how that little term Godwink was born 4 books ago, 1 million books ago, about 10 years ago.
Mm. I thought it was kind of interesting, kind of what's going on in the news lately with that God particle. They talk about it every few years. Again, a few weeks ago, they say they discovered it again. I don't think you really have to be a scientist to discover God in nature. I'm not trying to be religious here, but I mean, it's pretty obvious. I'm not even sure what that God particle is supposed to be. Do you know what that's all about?
Well, it's, as they say, it's above my pay grade. I do understand that what they say, and I'm not a theologian nor a physicist. I'm just the guy who brought you Schoolhouse Rock.
That's right.
But, the God particle is basically one scientist said it's the bang in the Big Bang Theory. It's the actual cornerstone of all matter. So once they unearth that, they haven't discovered it yet. I mean, they just know it's there. And once they can identify that, then they have, gotten to what they call the God particle. And so, but I go back to the fact that as the guy who thinks in terms of conjunction, junction, what's your function? The simplicity of my message is that there is a God, that and that you can communicate with this God, and if you have a communication that you build up with God that is like any other communication in your life, if you have, the more you communicate with your mom or your dad or your friend or your boss, the better your relationship is going to be. And so I've set forth 7 steps in this new book, and the first one is talk to the navigator. Because if you have a built-in GPS, which I believe we all do, a sophisticated navigational system, how do you program it? You talk to the navigator. So that is step number 1.
Talking with Squire Rushnell. The name of the book is Divine Alignment. You just mentioned it there, and again, for people who may not be aware, you mentioned the Schoolhouse Rock. I'm one of the kids of that era that watched those shows, and Conjunction Junction and all those great cartoons that you put together. And it was it the man who sang those? He was on the Merv Griffin show. I can't think of his name right now. Jack something.
You shouldn't have just mentioned that to me.
Jack. His name was Jack. He was the trumpeter on the Merv Griffin show. Yeah. Anyway, he did those great songs, and then, of course, you were the producer of those, so I just want to let people know about that. But
Well, I was the vice president in charge of children's television.
Right.
So, success always has many fathers, and I happened to be the guy that said, gee, that multiplication rock is working very well. Why don't we try something that's broader? Why don't we call it Schoolhouse Rock? So that's how I came to the party.
Yeah, great television, and unfortunately, I mean, a little off topic, but I mean, you don't see the great, you don't even see any good children's television, especially on networks, maybe on some cable channels, but I guess that whole industry has kind of gone away, hasn't it?
Oh, it sure has, yeah. It really has. It's not like the good old days when we had not only Schoolhouse Rock, but the ABC After School Special, and Kids Are People Too, and we did all of those shows, and we won all kinds of Emmys, but we still were number one, and it was the most profitable time in the history of children's television. So you can have it all. You just need to be able to treat your audience with great respect.
And you kind of talk about it in the book, kind of related to what your television job. I mean, you were with ABC for a long time, and went through a change in career, as we all do in this business. Sometimes we leave when we really don't want to, right? So you went through that yourself. I mean, you talk about it in the book, right?
Well, it was the first time that I ever actually admitted that I was fired at ABC. It's very hard to admit that. I mean, that's a pride issue that I had to get over, and it wasn't until I was writing this book that I felt as though the time had come where I really needed to fess up, and that I had been at ABC for 20 years. I had a great, successful run, and, Good Morning America was number one under my time there, and so I had a great time. And it was actually time for me to leave ABC, I felt. But they hired a guy who had been my nemesis at other networks. He had been the guy with the black hat, and I was the guy with the white hat, according to women who were in charge of children's action for children's television up in Boston. And so they always complained about him, and they always lauded. Don't you know, my bosses hired him to be my boss. And I could see a bullseye on my back. But when it happens, whatever they call it, downsizing or whatever they make it do to make it sound good, it feels like betrayal. And so I really had a hard time getting over the issue of admitting that. And so this book, Divine Alignment, is the first time that I tell that story.
And it all kind of, I mean, obviously everybody can relate, not necessarily if you don't have to be in broadcasting to have a job change by somebody else's decision, but I mean, that can open up other doors from you. Maybe that's, in a way, a God wink, right? I mean, you talk about that in the book. Those kind of circumstances or situations could be a direction for you, right, that you don't expect.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about it. When we look back at things, we say terrible things that happened in our lives. They were terrible then, but when you look back upon them, they were part of the divine alignment. I believe now that God needed to kick me in the pants and get me on my way. That I needed to have an impetus to move on, and because if I hadn't moved on, I couldn't have ended up becoming an author. I couldn't have been a speaker and all those things that I really wanted to do anyway. And I feel now that my destiny was not something that I thought it was, being a television executive, but my destiny, I believe, is to tell people stories, to be a storyteller, to hear people's stories and to help shape those stories and to tell them back and to inspire other people and to be an encourager. And that, I believe, is my mission. And so I feel I couldn't have done that if I hadn't gotten the kick in the pants and kicked out of ABC.
Mm. And again, I mean, you make the point, and I guess a lot of people might say, well, if things are really going rotten, why doesn't God jump in sooner or prevent things from happening? But again, you point out in the book, and we all know there is a free will involved, so we do have choices to make. And I think that's an important distinction to make. God isn't running our lives like we're puppets, right? I mean, we have a choice.
Well, exactly right. If God wanted robots who were doing everything, robotically, then he would have invented that. But I use the metaphor that that God puts us out there. If we get on the highway of life heading for what we believe to be our destiny, our hands are on the steering wheel most of the way. We have the free will to go too fast or too slow. We can go recklessly. We can go off the side of the road, never get back on, or we can go off a cliff. If we stay on the highway, if we obey the rules, if we head for where we believe our destiny is, it's going to be a great run.
Well, it's a really interesting book full of great stories. You know, you tell the story of your wife Louise at one time having the dream of meeting Carol Burnett, and she had that come true, and then again working with Tim Conway and kind of doing Carol Burnett's some of that type of material in her show today. Of course, great impressionist, does one of the best Carol Burnett impressions. So a lot of great stories in the book like that.
Yes, and I think that my wife's story actually is one of the best examples of how those 7 steps of divine alignment that I outline actually can apply to an individual's life. Because I say you begin to program your GPS. How do you do that? You talk to the navigator. Well, she was a kid who believed in talking to the navigator, in praying. And her mother gave her a quarter to go to the church, the Catholic Church, and to pray for the souls in purgatory. And so my wife thought she only had 1 prayer per quarter. And she put that quarter in and said, "Dear God, if I could just meet Carol Burnett." Well, you fast forward about 15 or 20 years, and that little girl's prayer was answered. Out of the blue, she gets a call from Carol Burnett, who sees a tape of her and says, "Come to the studio. I want to meet you." And she spends the day with Carol Burnett, and she comes outside the studio and says, "Oh, dear God, thank you. If I could just meet Tim and Harvey now." It was a matter of months, and out of the blue comes a call from Tim Conway. We're going on the road, Tim and I, Harvey and I. We're going to do a show called Together Again. Would you like to join us? Now, that is unbelievable divine alignment. But divine alignment happens in every single life. I happen to have mapped Louise's because I know her life, and so I know it very well. But you have divine alignment in your life, Doug. Every single person that's listening to us right now has got divine alignment. Those people who called out of the blue, the person who just happened to show up. The question is, what are we going to do from today forward now that we know that divine alignment is there? How are we going to take advantage of it? How are we going to program ourselves to make sure that we're in alignment for the divine alignment that is going to come along?
And also, kind of related to that, Carol Burnett's story, we won't go into it now, but I mean, where she was a young performer, I think right out of college, and out of the blue, this man gave her money to go to New York. There's a great story in the book. We won't tell it now, but it all kind of fits together, doesn't it?
Yes, it really does.
Yeah. The name of the book is Divine Alignment. We've been talking with Squire Rushnell today. I wish we had more time, but we'll do it again down the road. Squire, give it a website, then get a hold of the book, or get a hold of you if they like.
Well, whengodwinks.com is my website, and facebook.com/godwinks is where anybody can come and join us and join the sharing of Godwink stories. But Divine Alignment, of course, Amazon and Barnes & Noble online, or all around the country. I think there's the big bookstores that are down there around Sarasota. What do they call those? The 100 books or something?
Books
like
a Million.
Books a Million.
Books a Million, yeah.
I underestimated them.
Well, I'm sure it's anywhere. And again, Squire, really appreciate having a chance to talk to you. I know we haven't had a lot of time to chat verbally, but through email, but hopefully we'll meet in person one of these days. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Doug.